Pope Francis has vowed the Catholic Church will spare no effort to bring child abusers in the clergy to justice. The pontiff was speaking at the end of a 4-day Vatican summit to stop pedophilia in the church.
It's not every day you see a 5-year-old standing face-to-face with the leader of over 1 billion people. But when this young boy did, he didn't just ask any ordinary question, he asked something that completely caught Pope Francis off guard. For a brief moment, the world's most influential religious leaders seemed lost for words. What did this little boy ask that caused such a reaction? What was so deep that it shook even someone as seasoned as the Pope? Stick with us, because what happens next will leave you speechless and deeply moved. It was early morning in Vatican City, and the sun had just begun to peek over the ancient buildings, casting a soft light on the cobblestone streets. The air was cool, and there weren't many people around. Usually, the square outside St. Peter's Basilica was filled with tourists, but today it was quieter, almost like the city was waiting for something special to happen. Among the few people gathered in the square, a small family walked hand in hand. The father, tall and with a warm smile, held his wife's hand, a kind woman with gentle eyes. Between them was their son, William, who had just turned 5. He was small but full of curiosity, his eyes wide with excitement as he looked around. It was William's first time in the Vatican, and he couldn't believe everything was big. The giant columns in front of St. Peter's Basilica stretched so high that they looked like they could touch the sky. The square was huge too, almost like it went on forever. William had seen pictures of this place in books, but seeing it in person was different. It was real, and he felt part of something important. What happened next? Keep watching to find out. As William walked beside his parents, he felt excitement and nervousness. He had been told they were about to meet someone very special, someone who helped guide millions of people worldwide. This person was known as the Pope. William didn't fully understand the Pope, but he knew that he had to be a significant figure. He had seen pictures of him before, wearing his white robes and sitting in a big chair, surrounded by people who seemed to listen to his every word. William's parents were excited too, but in a different way. They had been invited to meet Pope Francis for a special charity event. His mother worked with a group that helped needy children, and the Pope offered to meet with them. Since William was still young, his mother had brought him along as her guest. It wasn't a typical day for most children, but for William, it was the beginning of something he would never forget. Despite the excitement, William had another reason for meeting the Pope. There was something that had been bothering him for a while. It was a question he couldn't stop thinking about. Why did God allow bad people to do bad things? Why did people hurt each other, argue, or say mean things? He saw it happen in his school, neighborhood, and even on the news. His parents had explained that sometimes people got upset or didn't understand each other, but William didn't quite understand why it had to happen at all. It didn't seem right to him. William had grown up in a home full of love. His parents always made sure he felt safe, happy, and cared for. He had never experienced the anger or hurt that seemed to live in some people's hearts. He just didn't understand why God allowed it. His mother had tried to answer his question the best she could, but William still felt confused. She had told him that it was hard for some people to be kind because they were scared or sad, while others were simply bad people who enjoyed doing bad things. But William didn't know if that was enough to explain all the pain he saw in the world. He wanted someone to give him an answer that made sense to him, and so. As William and his parents walked closer to the Vatican, William's thoughts turned back to the question in his heart. Maybe, just maybe, the Pope could help him understand. After all, he was someone who had spent his life teaching people about love and kindness. Maybe he knew why people hurt each other. Maybe the Pope could explain why the world wasn't always as gentle as William wished it could be. William didn't know what to expect when he met Pope Francis. He had heard stories about him, about how he always smiled at people and spoke kindly to them, no matter who they were. Maybe the Pope could give him the answer he had been searching for, the one that would finally make sense of everything. But as William walked through the quiet streets with his parents, he didn't know that this meeting would turn out to be something he would never forget. It was about to be a moment that would change his understanding of kindness and love forever. The excitement in the air was contagious as William and his family made their way through the crowds in St. Peter's Square. People from all walks of life were gathered, eagerly awaiting the moment when Pope Francis would speak. The atmosphere felt special, with an undeniable sense of anticipation. It wasn't just a normal day. It was as though something monumental was about to happen. William's small hand gripped his mother's as they carefully went through the sea of people. They had traveled from their home country to be a part of this experience, and William could feel the weight of this important event pressing down on him. It wasn't every day a child got to see the Pope, let alone get so close. His heart was racing with excitement, but there was also a nervousness creeping up, as if he knew something significant was about to unfold. As they drew closer to the front of the crowd, William's gaze fixated on the man in white standing before them. Pope Francis was speaking to the crowd, his words reaching everyone with a calm and warm authority. His robe glowed in the sunlight, and his presence was powerful but gentle. William could feel a strange sense of peace just from being in his presence. His parents stood behind him, listening to the Pope's message about kindness, the importance of treating others with respect, and how the world could be a better place if people just tried a little harder to understand one another. The words hung in the air, powerful and full of meaning, but William found his mind drifting to a different place. Though he tried to focus on the Pope's words, William couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with the world. People weren't always kind, and that made him wonder about the point of trying to be good if others didn't do the same. It was a thought that troubled him, one he couldn't shake, and as he stood there, he realized he needed to know the answer. The crowd began to thin as people made their way to the area where they could meet the Pope. William's family, too, began to move closer, their excitement building. The closer they got to the Pope, the more William's heart seemed to pound in his chest. He could hardly believe it. He was going to be face to face with the Pope. But as the distance closed between them, something inside William shifted. His question, the one he had been carrying, was burning more intensely. Before his parents could react, William felt a sudden rush of energy. He pulled his hand out of his mother's grasp and ran toward the Pope. He didn't stop to think. He just knew that he had to ask. His family called out to him, but William's focus was sharp. He was determined to ask the question that had been on his mind for months, maybe even longer. The Pope had been engaged with others around him, but noticed William running toward him. With a calm smile, he stopped what he was doing and gave the child his full attention. William, feeling a bit shy now that he was close, stopped in front of the Pope, staring up at him with wide eyes. The Pope, noticing the look of curiosity on William's face, lowered himself slightly to meet his gaze. He didn't rush him, didn't say anything. He simply waited. William stood still for a moment, his heart racing. He glanced at his parents, then back at the Pope, before summoning all his courage to speak. "Why do people hurt each other?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "If God is good and teaches us to love each other, why do bad things happen? Why does God allow it?" The Pope paused, his gaze resting gently on William. His face softened into a warm smile, and he crouched slightly to meet William's eyes. "That is a big question, my child," the Pope said softly, his voice filled with kindness. "And it is a question many people have asked, including me." William blinked, surprised. You've wondered about it too? The Pope nodded. Oh yes. Even as grown-ups, we don't always have all the answers. But I believe that God gave us something very special to help with that question. Our ability to choose love, even in difficult times. Sometimes people make choices out of fear or pain, and those choices hurt others. But every act of kindness, no matter how small, helps heal that hurt. But why doesn't God just stop the bad things from happening? William pressed on, his brow furrowed. The Pope smiled again, placing a gentle hand on William's shoulder. God doesn't force love upon us, my child. He invites us to it. And in that invitation, He gives us the freedom to choose. It is in our choices, in how we live and treat one another, that we bring His goodness into the world. It's not always easy, but every kind act makes a difference. William felt a strange mixture of emotions, confusion, hope, and a quiet sense of understanding. So, how can I help do that? The Pope's smile widened. You already have by asking this question. Keep asking, keep caring, and keep choosing love. That's how we make the world brighter. Before William could speak again, the Pope reached out and embraced him in a warm hug. It wasn't just a fleeting gesture. It was a full embrace, one that made William feel safe and cared for. At that moment, the weight of the world's cruelty seemed a little less heavy. As the hug ended, William looked up at the Pope, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. He didn't have all the answers to his question, but he felt something important had shifted. The kindness and warmth he had just experienced gave him a new perspective, one that wasn't focused on the negativity in the world, but on the love and goodness that people could choose to share with each other. William's parents, who had been watching from a distance, couldn't believe their eyes. They had known their son was special, but seeing this intimate moment between him and the Pope left them speechless. The small boy, who had asked such a simple yet profound question, was now standing beside the man he had admired for so long, feeling lighter than ever. As William stood beside the Pope, he felt a warmth spread through him, as if the burden of confusion and doubt that had weighed on his young mind had finally begun to lift. His question, the one that had caused him so much inner turmoil, no longer seemed so pressing. It was as though the simple act of being heard had given him the peace he so desperately sought. The Pope's embrace had not only been an act of kindness, but also an affirmation that there was hope, even in a world that often seemed difficult to understand. The crowd around them began to cheer, though the noise was muffled in William's ears. It wasn't the cheers that mattered in that moment, but the sense of reassurance that had settled in his heart. He had never expected anything like this to happen, certainly not when he had first arrived at St. Peter's Square. But somehow, in the brief exchange with the Pope, he felt like he had received more than he had imagined. The simple yet powerful gesture of kindness had answered his question in ways he never thought possible. As William turned to his parents, his eyes sparkled with a new sense of understanding. He looked up at his mother, who smiled back with tears in her eyes, and then at his father, who patted him gently on the back. Without a word, they all knew that something significant had just taken place. This moment, so unexpected and beautiful, would stay with them forever. But as they slowly made their way through the crowd to leave St. Peter's Square, William's mind couldn't help but wander again, though this time it was different. Rather than focusing on the hurt he had once seen in the world, he began to think of the ways he could bring more kindness into his own life. He remembered the Pope's message about small acts of love, the way even the smallest gesture could create ripples of positivity. In that moment, William decided that he would be the one to spread kindness, one small action at a time. The walk back to their hotel was quiet, filled with thoughts. William had always been a child who paid attention to the world around him, noticing things that others often overlooked. But now, as he walked alongside his parents, he found himself seeing the world through a different lens. The faces of strangers, the people bustling through the streets, didn't seem so distant anymore. He realized that everyone, no matter where they came from or what their story was, could use a little more kindness. And if each person made just one effort to be kind, the world could be a much better place. That night, as the family sat down for dinner, William's parents couldn't help but reflect on the incredible experience they had just shared. They had come to see the Pope as a symbol of peace, but what they hadn't expected was how William's innocence and his simple question would create such a meaningful moment. It was a reminder that sometimes the most profound wisdom came from the mouths of the youngest among us. William had asked a question that many adults had probably wondered themselves, but it was his sincerity and his willingness to seek out the answer that had made all the difference. When William finished his meal, he looked up at his parents with a grateful expression. He didn't need to say anything to communicate what was on his mind. His parents understood. This trip had been more than just an opportunity to see the Pope. It had been a journey of self-discovery for their son. And perhaps it had been a sign to get in touch with reality, that sometimes the world could be a little bit brighter if we simply looked at it through the eyes of a child. The following days in Rome felt different. It was as though the city had taken on a new meaning for William. Everywhere he went, he saw beauty and kindness in the smallest of things. The way the street vendors smiled as they sold their goods, the laughter of children playing in the piazzas, and the peaceful sounds of church bells ringing in the distance. William's understanding of the world deepened. He came to understand that while some problems seemed too big to solve, each person could do their part to make a difference. Whether it was a smile, a kind word, or a small act of generosity, every action mattered. His belief in the power of kindness became his guiding principle, shaping his future choices and the person he would become. Years later, when William was a teenager, he returned to St. Peter's Square. Even though William was a young boy, just 5 years old, the experience was an unforgettable moment with Pope Francis. The lessons he had learned rang clear in his heart. He walked through the square with his parents, this time with a quiet pride. He wasn't the same boy who had stood before the Pope some minutes ago. He was someone who had learned that asking questions, seeking answers, and spreading love could change the world, even if just a little bit at a time. It was as if William had unlocked a new way of seeing the world, one where goodness was present in even the most ordinary moments. The family visited other sites in Rome, but William was quieter now, more reflective. He took everything in with a sense of wonder that only a child could have. Yet, it wasn't just a wonder he felt. It was a deep appreciation for life itself. He had realized that the world was full of complexity, of joy and pain, of kindness and cruelty. But there was always a chance to make a difference. In his small way, William had made a promise to himself that he would continue to look for the good, to be the light in places that felt dark. When they returned home, William shared his experience with his friends and teachers. He told them about his encounter with the Pope, the feeling of being heard, and the lessons he had learned. His words, though simple, were filled with wisdom beyond his years. And as William continued to grow, so did his understanding of what it meant to be kind, to care for others, and to always ask questions, even the tough ones. And so, William's journey didn't end in Rome. It was just the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one where he would carry the lessons of that day with him forever. As Williams got older, it was obvious that sometimes the most important lessons come not from textbooks or lectures, but from moments of connection, from small gestures of kindness, and from the simple act of asking questions and seeking answers with an open heart. William's life slowly began to transform after his moment with Pope Francis. His newfound understanding of kindness and compassion stayed with him, and his parents noticed a change in him. No longer did he feel lost in his questions about the world. Instead, he had a quiet confidence in his ability to make a difference. At school, William became a voice for the underdog, standing up for classmates who were teased or left out. He understood now that the world didn't have to be perfect to be beautiful. It just had to be full of love and understanding. That's not all. His teachers, too, saw the difference. His interactions with his classmates became more thoughtful, as he not only applied what he had learned in school, but also the lessons he had learned from his experience with the Pope. It was as though a light had been switched on inside of him, and every day he found new ways to bring that light into the world. One afternoon, William came home from school with a big smile on his face. He had started a small group at school to help others who were feeling lonely or isolated. The group wasn't just about helping. It was about making sure no one felt forgotten. It wasn't a huge group, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that William had found a way to carry the lesson of kindness into his everyday life. He no longer waited for someone else to fix things. He was the one leading the way, no matter how small the steps were. Months passed, and William's story spread beyond his school. Local newspapers picked up the story of the young boy who had confronted the Pope with a tough question and walked away with a powerful lesson in return. Though William never sought attention or fame, he soon found that people wanted to hear about his story. His parents, too, noticed how the experience had made their family stronger. They became closer, sharing not just their love for one another, but their shared commitment to making the world better in whatever way they could. The family's connection to the Vatican remained strong. They sent a letter of thanks to Pope Francis, telling him how his simple act of kindness had changed their lives. The letter wasn't about seeking recognition. It was simply a way to express gratitude. In turn, they received a letter from the Vatican, thanking them for their kind words and offering prayers for their continued journey. And so, William's journey continued. Though the world was still far from perfect, he knew that with each act of kindness, with each moment of understanding, he was helping to create a brighter future. He had found his purpose, not in seeking grand answers to life's toughest questions, but in living with an open heart and a willingness to share that heart with the world. If you had the chance to ask someone important one question, what would it be and why? Let us know in the comment section. We hope you enjoyed watching this video. Remember to like, share it, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.